Hey, folks. Welcome to the Mac and Mike Show. Appreciate you joining us today. I'm Mac, and that guy over there, or over there, whichever way he shows up on your screen, is Mike. And we're doing this remotely again today because I've got a whole range of issues. You know, what's that song? I got 99 problems, but this isn't one of them. Well, this is one of them. This weekend, I got a lot of things going on, and I want to wish everybody, if you missed it, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, because we're doing this in the week between the days before or between Christmas and New Year's. It's a special time. Um, had a wonderful time with family. That's the most important thing. So today, Mike and I decided we are going to talk about a article that was in the New York Post, and hopefully Mike will add the link to the article in the comments of our video. But I was startled when I read this, and I wasn't sure if I believed it or not. But according to exit polling done this past election season, for the first time since 1928, 1928 when the Bambino was hitting home runs out of the original Yankee Stadium, and we didn't have the 1929 stock market crash yet. That kind of 1928, for the first time since 1928, more people leaving the voting booth, a greater percentage of them, majority of them, identified as Republicans. Now, 1928 is a long time ago. That's almost 100 years, right? You think about it, this is 2024. And the interesting thing is all the Republican presidents that have been elected since that time, they were all playing one of these, yes, I'm a Republican, but I support this, or yes, I'm a Republican, but I support this. Now, was it 1994 when Newt Gingrich, no, not, was it 94?
It was in the 90s.
Now, Newt Gingrich, with the new revolution and the new pact with the American public. They had the 10 points that they were going to work on, and it was the commitment to the American public. They have a name for it that escapes me right now, but he did almost all of them except the term limits was the one he missed on. But I was a little bit shocked, pleased, mind you, because I generally think that the Republican platform reflects my position more than the Democratic platform, and that's mostly, I think, on the fiscal and social issues. The issue of abortion, the issue of a balanced budget, the government not spending more money than they have, that kind of thing. That's where I find agreement with the Republican Party on, and I'm not sure that that's what you find, Mike. But I guess I'll give you a chance. What do you think about this? This story attributes the change in people's attitude as opposed to self-identifying as Democrat or Republican directly on Donald Trump, the candidate, and basically says it's kind of a challenge. Well, Donald Trump has a new coalition. Can he keep it?
Well, first, it was exit polling. So I think it was 31, 37 or something like that, with still the majority identifying as independents. But, in previous years, just the general population, the Democrats still hold, I think, a 1 point lead in America overall. And I think it was just low turnout because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's failed presidential 4 years. I mean, we've talked about the incompetency, the hiding of the truth about Joe Biden, Kamala Harris not being even nominated by the party. But you're right that we have Trump, who a former Democrat himself, has brought in all these other Democrats. RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard himself, Elon Musk.
I was going to say Elon Musk was a Democrat.
Yeah. And so I think we're seeing a shift in America waking up, that it's not about party as much as it is policy. So people hopefully are starting to listen closer to the policy points. Now, in Donald Trump's case, we had 4 years of a proven presidency. So can we keep that? If he follows through with all of his promises, or at least the majority of them, and the stock market doesn't crash, the economy doesn't crash, and he's able to bring peace to the Middle East and to the Ukraine situation, stabilize relationships with China, and of course Panama now is in question. I think we're in for, if nothing else, 12 years of presidential Republican presidency. Maybe not a generation in the House and the Senate, but probably 12 years total for Republicans in the presidency. Just my thought.
What's interesting to me is that traditionally and historically, if you go back through the elections that have been held and have been decided, um, the when a president gets elected and he is it's his first time in office. Now it's a little bit different because Trump was president before, but traditionally, when a new president is elected, the 2 years after his election, when there is another election, that that election usually loses legislative seats. So this new um, this new organization, this new conglomerate of people that voted for Trump, this new kind of arrangement between Democrats and independents and Republicans, and the majority of people identifying as Republicans in the first time for nearly 100 years, that can easily be lost. And Trump's, I don't want to call it a honeymoon because as we talked before, he had been elected before, right? This is his second term, albeit not consecutively. If he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, it's entirely possible that this Republican sweep of both houses of Congress, having a majority in both the House and the Senate of the U.S. Congress, could be lost 2 years from now. What would that mean to a Trump administration? And your assertion that there may be 12 years worth of presidential Republicans, that is Donald Trump and then 8 years of J.D. Vance, that is a similar kind of thing as to what happened after we had the horrible administration of Jimmy Carter, followed by Ronald Reagan, and 8 years of Ronald Reagan, and then 4 years of H.W. Bush. So I'm not disputing that your projection might be accurate, but Donald Trump has some really tall challenges in front of him. There's so much going on in our streets, the neighborhoods that people are unhappy with. And which do you think, Mike, is the biggest issue for most Americans? Is it crime or is it inflation?
I'd
Or
say
another one, a third one?
I think inflation is, it's the economy stupid is the old saying.
That's a
Now,
James Carville thing,
yeah.
yeah, from the Clinton administration.
So since Newt Gingrich's contract with America, I think
That's what I was searching for, the contract for America. Yep.
yeah, I think where he lost it was when he started to talk about cutting Medicare. There had to be some cutbacks. So
Yes.
I think that's what brought him down.
Yes.
So that's another area that I think Trump is smart enough to stay away from.
But doesn't Donald Trump have to do the same thing? I mean, with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, that represents, in the parlance of politics, the third rail, right? You don't touch the third rail. But isn't that the majority of our federal budget? And doesn't that have to be modified?
At some point, yeah, I think we're going to have to wait a while, get the majority of the most popular things with the American people accomplished first, keeping the economy up, taxes low, securing the border, and of course, trying to keep the world stable and peaceful without having to expend our our funds through too much military aid to countries like Ukraine. So, yeah, in the long run, I think those two subjects need to be brought up, but maybe somewhere in the, I don't know, next Republican president midway through his first term, something of that nature. And like I said the other week, whatever's brought forward, it needs to be a gradual change, like, upping the Medicare age by 6 months every year until it hits a reasonable level. Medicare, I'm not sure we can touch because, the big problem with a lot of Americans, other than you and I, who are covered by Medicare and TRICARE, is health insurance. Talk to your kids. It's a big out of pocket expense. It scares a lot of people.
Huge.
Yeah. So I'm not sure we can't follow any of the other world views on insurance. Like Canada's not doing well with their socialized medicine, nor is any country in Europe. When they do, they have to cut back seriously on other issues. So again, I think we need a stable economy first, a proven stable economy. Then we can start talking about modifying these other social programs.
There's so many things that, in my mind, are kind of on the plate of the new president of the United States, the new commander in chief. We have the economy, of course, with our inflation, and the inflation directly tied to the continued unabated printing of US dollars. We're not the only country in the world that's doing that, but it's weakening the dollar. And, a head of lettuce isn't intrinsically worth more than it was 8 or 10 years ago, but it costs more because the value of the dollar has been damaged. So inflation is not necessarily, in years past, when you looked at inflation, you could assign a lot of different contributors to that. Oftentimes it was the increased cost of goods. Sometimes it was, maybe tariffs from other nations. Sometimes it was the increased cost of labor. The unique thing about what's going on today is that our inflation is a self-inflicted wound because of our unabated and really, I think, tragic. What do they call it? There's a term they use for it, but this continuous printing of dollars without changing anything. Oh, quantitative easing, right? Quantitative easing is the term. And what it does is it not only destroys the dollars that are in our pockets, but it destroys the dollars in our savings account. So people are not encouraged to save, and that's a significant problem because only by saving do we have a financial foundation to work from. But I'm not so certain, Mike, that crime, rampant crime, isn't going to be the issue that's on everybody's mind. I don't know if you know, California had a new proposition on the ballot, and remember in California they made a law that said if you could shoplift or you could steal up to $1,000 and not be prosecuted, right? Well, in this last election, California, I think to some people's surprise, passed a proposition. I think it was Proposition 34, but don't quote me on that. It was a proposition in California that the voters voted on to make that kind of theft a felony. So now these people are going into stores and stealing, these electric bicycles that cost $900, and they're being arrested and charged with a felony, different than a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor, you get a ticket basically and say, appear before a judge on such and such a date. They just never showed up. And, misdemeanors being lower on the totem pole of crimes we want to prosecute, they didn't go out and get them. Well, now when they're being charged with a felony, they go to jail. They either have to be bailed or bonded out, or they stay in jail until their hearing. So these thieves are crazy. I mean, they're I guess crazy, surprised that their craziness is no longer accepted. And you can see that, what was it, last week or 10 days ago, we had the Guatemalan illegal immigrant on the subway train lit a innocent person sleeping on the train on fire. And rather than rushing to this person's aid, people took videos of it. Um, how can you live in a society where if you're just innocently taking the subway and next thing you know you're burning to death?
Well, she was a homeless woman, which doesn't change things. Just to be clear. Um, it's interesting. Jordan Peterson was asked about that, and he wasn't quite sure. There's a lot of other factors when it comes to whether or not somebody's going to step in. They were talking about the Daniel Penny effect, where
Yes.
people would be reluctant to. But he also pointed out in a larger crowd of people, you're less apt to see somebody step forward than if there's only a handful of people. It's because everybody's looking to somebody else to do it, be the first to step up. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty horrible what we're seeing. And I think, that's what Trump represents as a return to law and order. Now, there's nothing he can do much about states and cities except try and encourage Congress to withhold funds to like sanctuary cities and states. Uh, but when you have DAs that won't prosecute, I don't think there's a lot that a president can do. It's up to the local people. Now in New York, we saw Staten Island and Brooklyn and Queens in certain areas come out with a higher vote percentage for Trump than ever before.
Yeah.
Manhattan is still Manhattan. That's the heart of the liberalism. But yeah, I think it's just going to take enough pain. That's how New York City got Rudy Giuliani years ago. They were in enough pain that they said, okay, Dinkins and these other guys weren't doing a good job. So we'll see if the citizens step up. If you're living in a city where you've got these kind of problems, you can only blame the liberals in your city. And if that's you, then you got to blame yourself.
There are things he can do, and I think the guy that heads up the ICE, Holman, is the name Holman?
Holman.
Huh?
Yeah, Holman.
Yeah, he's already told these various mayors and these various city police departments, hey, listen, if you aid and abet illegals in escaping ICE, that's a felony, and we're going to prosecute you. And there are a couple of mayors and a couple of governors have taken positions anti-Trump's. We're going to send them home, the mass deportation edict. And this Holman guy's not backing down. He's basically telling these people, look, you can do what you want, but if you do this, understand that we're going to use the full and complete capabilities of the law to enforce what the voters have voted for.
Yeah, well, that only affects illegal aliens.
Right.
These thieving crimes, a lot of them are being done by citizens that have been here forever. So again, it goes back to, a lot of the gangs you saw in LA and New York, they weren't immigrants. They were, hate to say it, most of them were black. They rampage into stores and they run out. Nobody can stop them. But now, as you pointed out, that's changed in California. Let's see if DAs start to wake up and say, hey, this guy's a recidivist. He's been in here 10 times. We're not just going to let him back out in the street.
You don't think that the increase in crime, either on the subways or in our city streets, is due to the increase in illegal immigrants? Look what's going on.
100%. I mean, these problems existed back when Trump was president, when we had the borders fairly locked down. California, New York, Chicago, a lot of major cities were seeing these crime sprees where people would just rush in and steal things. Now, yes, it's gotten worse with the illegal immigrants and the Tren de Aragua and, MS-13 people. But I don't know what percentage. I mean, even if we got rid of those people, we still have our own domestic issues to face. And what I'm saying is the district attorneys need to start punishing everyone. You can't see criminals as victims.
Yeah.
It's us who are put upon either as people who purchase things in stores that we're paying partially more for because of crime and shoplifting, and recidivism, where people are being murdered when a criminal is let out on the street after he's maybe held up a grocery store a couple times. That stuff has got to stop. And it's up to the local DAs to stop it, whether it's an American citizen or an illegal immigrant.
You don't think that the I don't think, let me start over again. I don't think there's any question in my mind that the Trump administration is going to gather up these foreign gangs and deport them. Do you think he will or will not do that?
Yeah, Holman has made it clear that they're going to prioritize the criminals, the gang members, and the people that did not show up for their hearings first.
Okay.
Now, right there is about 20 million of them. So now you only have 10 million more to go. So I think they'll be working through this process for the next 10 years or more.
The things that have gone on in Denver and in Colorado and Aurora, where these gang members were going into these apartment buildings and collecting rent from the apartment dwellers and not giving it to the building owners, just taking the rent money from these people. That never happened before that I recall in America. That's a new crime from my perspective.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the crime issue has been with us for a very long time. I go back to when I was a kid in New York City. And like I said, it was a huge problem. And that's how Rudy Giuliani got elected. He was a pro-cop, tough on crime mayor. He even had the broken windows campaign,
right?
Which meant, if somebody commits a low level crime, breaking windows, breaking and entering, that person has to be treated severely. That has nothing to do with illegal immigration. Of course, that's made it worse. But even if you remove that aspect, what I'm saying is we still have to get tough on crime DAs and mayors. Not just, yes, illegal immigration, of course, but there's things besides illegal immigration to deal with.
Well, Elon Musk has already announced the program. Elon Musk, what did he commit to the Trump campaign? $50 million a month for 3 months or something like that from himself and other donors. But he came out shortly after the election. He came out and said that much like George Soros and his organization donated money specifically to have more liberal DAs and attorney generals elected in these various cities and states, Musk said he's going to do the same thing to get rid of these liberal, woke DAs and attorney generals. I believe he'll do that. I think he said he was going to do it. I believe he'll do that. That will make a difference, right?
Of course. But you've got to, again, you've got to convince the people. Money is one thing, but we saw like Trump won with what, 1/3 the money the Democrats spent, and
right.
Last time 1/2 the amount. So if you have the people on your side, it's going to take less effort from people like Musk with big money, but that will matter because you need to educate the people. Like I've always said, my friend Stan says, nothing matters until it becomes personal. So if you look at a big city situation, if you or a relative hasn't been, or a loved one hasn't been immediately affected by a particular crime, it's less likely to move you to vote for a tough on crime candidate. But if it touches you and you're educated and you see it through commercials and advertisements that this is happening, you say, well, maybe that could be me next time. That could be my wife, my children, my coworker, my friend. So those are the types of commercials and education that have to go on in these big cities to move people in their emotional status to vote for a tough on crime person. Because Mac, at the other point of view is, if you go to the previously, now I think it's changing naturally, but you go to the poor neighborhoods and blacks especially, you will hear them say, well, the cops are always tougher on us, or we can't afford the lawyers to get out of this. And that's how it was previously. So this is the whiplash. And see, that again, I go back to this, Matt. I hate to keep harping on it. We swing in our pendulums too far, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. We keep going back and forth, and it's usually somewhere right here in the middle that we need to be. You have to have some compassion for people, but at the same time, you've got to punish crime. You can't just let it go. It's like I say, get out in the street and talk to your neighbor. My liberal neighbor was just over delivering me some food that they had left over from Christmas yesterday. And all that thought of politics has gone out the window. Here it is, Christmas. See, we disagree completely on politics, but there's nothing she wouldn't and her husband wouldn't do for me, and nothing I wouldn't do for them. See, this is the real world. And if you ask her about crime, she would sound like a Republican. That's the thing. That's the funny thing about, I guess, rural Democrats. They're not the crazies that you see in the universities, college campuses, the young people, the far left in the big cities. They're mainly common sense folks, but they need a little bit of nudging and moving in the direction to help their fellow Democrats see, maybe we need to lock people up to do certain things.
If Elon Musk is successful in turning out some of these liberal woke DAs and attorney generals, and Donald Trump is successful in repatriating or deporting these just the criminals. I'm not talking about all the illegal immigrants, but just the ones that are garnering the headlines when they burn someone to death or they commit some other heinous crime. Don't you think, going back to the original premise of the story that written in the Post, and the question that I'm asking today, won't that naturally force more of these Democrats that have, your term, victims of these things, won't they have a natural tendency to reconsider their political affiliation and and maybe support Republicans that even claim to be Republicans? You can see it even in the unions that have heretofore always been supporters of the Democratic Party, and yet I won't say most, many of the largest unions, like I remember the truckers, right? But many of these large unions didn't endorse Trump, but they did not endorse for president this year. That indicates to me a weakness of the Democratic Party. And, I'm not gloating, and I'm certainly happy that we have Donald Trump as our president. And I think that J.D. Vance will follow Donald Trump if Donald Trump follows through with all his promises. But who do the Democrats have that can challenge in the next election? It certainly won't be Kamala Harris again. Who's their bench? Is it Governor Whitmer from Michigan? Is it Governor Newsom from California? I mean, really, is it the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg? Who is it that has the national stature and the policies that got Donald Trump elected, who would be able to put forth a reasonable Democratic comparison against a successful Donald Trump 4-year period of time when he was in the Oval Office, his presidency?
Well, yeah, you look at guys like Shapiro here in Pennsylvania has been a name that's been floated. Of course, they lost Joe Manchin because he no longer really considers himself a Democrat. And I think he's about ready to go off into the sunset anyway. But yeah, they have no national name. But of course, I think the name Shapiro is going to appear in that next Democrat presidential primary. Now he's not that well known. That's the other thing. He doesn't have a lot of name recognition. Kamala Harris really screwed up by not picking him to at least give him some name recognition, even if they failed. Because I think even with Shapiro, they would have failed to win the election.
What, you don't think Tim Walz has a national reputation now to be able to run for president in 4 years?
No, I think he shot himself in the foot, or literally couldn't shoot a gun, so he can't shoot himself in the foot.
Well, we'll see. I think that this assertion that more people consider themselves Republican than Democrats for the first time in almost 100 years, based on this exit poll, I think that is a fantastic um, perspective. I don't want to call it a fact because, as you noted, it was exit polls, and we don't know where and when and how and a whole lot of things. Before you take a poll as valid, you have to understand the underpinnings of the poll. How did they put it together? Why was it done? But if it's true that more Americans consider themselves Republicans than Democrats, then I think that bears well and bodes well for the Republicans in the 2-year off-year election that's going to occur in 2 years and a month or whatever, or a month less than 2 years when we have that midterm election, and see whether or not we get more Republicans elected to the various legislative bodies or not. But here's something else that I think is going to factor into it, and it's not directly related, but I do think it's not directly related to the point that we're trying to make. But I do think that if something like this happens, it will have a dramatic impact on what people are thinking 2 years from now. And that's the video I sent you that was the Rogan interview with the guy who was the special operations, and I don't remember his name off the top of my head. Well, one of the topics they talked about was the drug cartels and will special forces be brought into play to cut off the heads to take down these drug cartels in Mexico that are sending so many illegal substances that are killing Americans into our country. I'd like to say it's a double-edged sword, but it's more than that. It's kind of like a 5 or 6-edged sword.
Yeah, I don't know. The special forces guy didn't think it would be as successful or as easy as a lot of people anticipate. Of course, it would depend on the cooperation that you get from the Mexican government. See, this is one of the things that, I spent half of my career in the military down in South and Central America, fighting alongside of the intel agencies with collecting data on the narco terrorists. And that's what you're up against. The techniques they use are similar. They threaten the lives of the loved ones of police officers, mayors, police chiefs, elected officials. And they carry through with these threats. These are not, Hollywood, yeah, I'm threatening, but there's enough other good people. Once they reach a certain amount of control over a particular area, that has a tendency to spread. And you can see that if you look at the different, states in Mexico, they call it. They just tumbled like a bunch of dominoes. Now, I personally have a feeling, maybe it's a matter of pride, that our special ops teams could really do this and do it rather quickly. But the problem is you can solve the initial problem, but there's a long run problem, and that is the Mexican political system. How long would it take for them to reinstate? We could maybe defeat it for 10 years, and 15 years later, it's back.
Do you remember the primary reason that guy offered as far as why it would be difficult for our special operations people to attack and defeat the cartels?
Well, he said because they're so well trained, they've been anticipating this for a number of years, so they're prepared. But trust me, brother, nobody is prepared for U.S. Special Forces. I'm sorry.
But the thing that I thought was chilling that he said, and I don't know if maybe you didn't pick up on it. He said that our government is so corrupt that if we had a plan and we had an order to put our special forces up against these various drug cartels and their, in their headquarters and that the cartels would be warned in advance that our special forces were coming.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. And yeah, of course, that's possible. But remember, our politicians will make the rule that, yeah, this is how we're going to operate. But then it's going to be up to the military. And if we get our military straight again, no, it's not going to leak. There's no way. And let me say this again. I might sound a little cocky here, but I think we could almost telegraph and tell them the date, time, second we're coming, and all the weapons we're going to use, and they still lose.
Well, there's no doubt that we would own the skies, right? I mean,
we own more. We own everything, baby. Yeah. We own the electronic field. There is no way you can keep us from knowing what you're going to do. We have ground penetrating systems that we can see from the sky and satellites. We know where everything is before we go in today. We've gotten so much better since I've been retired 22 years. And what we could do 22 years ago was amazing.
Well, Mike, I hope you're right. But I guess my point is that all of these issues that are affecting America today, they're all intertwined at some level, And I know this is going to sound trite, and it's going to sound maybe even a little bit, untoward, but I really believe that the complete and total ineffectiveness of the Biden administration for 4 years allowed all of these problems to compound on top of one another. How many thousands of American lives have been lost to the fentanyl tragedy? Do you think that Donald Trump, there's a lot of ways to handle that problem, but one of the many ways is, remember when Donald Trump had President Xi at Mar-a-Lago for dinner, and he excused himself from the table for a moment, and then he came back and he said, "Oh, by the way, we just launched, 58 or 60, whatever the number was, cruise missiles towards our enemies in the Middle East, and we've completely taken them out." That gets people's attention, and I don't think she wants to mess with Donald Trump. I really don't. And if he puts out the edict, no more fentanyl to Mexico, that will have a bearing on it, won't it?
I think it'll have some factor. Again, as soon as Trump is no longer in power, they'll keep testing. They test us. They'll test J.D. Vance, too. They'll test the next Republican president. By the way, we're coming down to, I think, our 2-minute mark.
Well, I don't think J.D. Vance will have any problem following on to Donald Trump. But there's a lot of rumors that Putin has been severely weakened through this Ukraine war. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that, on January 20th, when President-elect Trump becomes President Trump, that war in Ukraine will wind down rather suddenly.
Yeah, I have a feeling that'll happen too.
That'll have an impact on our economy because inflation is in no small part due to the billions of dollars that we're spending on helping the Ukrainians fight a war that we shouldn't be in. And we don't want to get on that tangent, but we can maybe talk about that in a future.
Well, Trump will seriously put the pressure on Russia through just his energy policy alone.
Yes.
It's going to drive down the price of oil, which reduces the amount of money the Russians have to prosecute war.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing, using economy? We should talk about the Panama Canal one of these days, too, because the Chinese think they're going to take it. And what did Trump say recently? Maybe we'll just take it back.
Yeah.
Honestly, he's got guts, and he knows how to make headlines. I think he'll be successful, Mike. I think that if he continues with his program, we will continue to see a rise in the number of people who self-identify as Republicans. And I'm not sure that's fair because I'm not sure Republicans are what they want to be. I think it's Trumpist or MAGA Trump that they want to be.
Yeah,
Fair?
I think so. Well, we're
Let's
about
wrap
out of
this up
time.
then.
Yep. Mac and Mike.
Out.
Out.